I am C-3PO.
Han Solo.
I got him!
You don't know the power of the dark side.
You were the chosen one!
Execute Order 66.
All right, and we're here. We're going to talk about droids today. We had this idea. It was just going to be like all things droids. We did like all lightsabers, which actually went so long that we had to make 2 podcasts out of it. Who knows? Maybe the same thing will happen with this one. But we thought, kind of a fun one. And the more that Nick and I talked about it, we realized there's some parts of it that are not that fun because it gets a little serious about the droids.
Yeah, it's going to start fun. It's going to start fun, and then it might get a little dark. We apologize in advance for that, but there's some things that need to be talked about.
It's true. Nick and I have seen some things online. One video in particular that really kind of opened our eyes, and we'll get into that later. But first, we're gonna start light.
Yes,
because on the surface, droids are pretty lighthearted characters. I mean, they're like comic relief characters, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty hard to like overstate how integral droids are to Star Wars and like to pop culture in general. Even if it's just like R2-D2 and C-3PO, they were like everywhere. I saw some like footage of like the opening of Star Wars and like, they would have all this media and whatever there, and like R2 and C-3PO would be there because they were easy. You could put any guy in a suit and he could be C-3PO, and then you just needed a robot R2-D2, and it's pretty simple. It just rolls around. Nick had some comments about the way he was during the prequels and then during the trilogy, but we'll also get into that.
But yeah, they are like crazy important to Star Wars. I mean, the first 2 Star Wars characters anyone ever saw on the big screen were R2-D2 and C-3PO. Like, those are the first 2 characters you see on the ship in the opening scene of Episode 4. And then they walk across the hallway, like almost getting shot. I think they're the only 2 characters that are in every single episodic movie of Star Wars. 1, 2, 3, all the numbered episodes. C-3PO and R2-D2 are in every single one, and I don't think that can be said for any other character.
Yeah, I mean, they even have a cameo in Rogue One, right?
Oh, yeah, I forgot.
That's right. They're like leaving the hangar, and there's the 2 of them, like
right,
waving goodbye or whatever. Yeah, so even those 2 particular droids are everywhere. So I've talked previously about how I went to film school, now a long time ago, but I remember a teacher talking about Star Wars, and he was describing how R2-D2 and C-3PO are like an archetype from Greek plays and like Shakespearean plays, which is there's a certain archetype, and it's called the chorus. So like in Greek theater, you have characters that are not actors. They're not the main characters in the play, but they're also not audience members. They're somewhere in between. So what they do is they stand by and they comment on the action that's taking place. And they sort of tell you how you're supposed to feel about what is happening on screen.
Is this kind of like the puppets or the old men Muppets?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, it's that archetype. It kind of goes back to this ancient Greek thing, which it's called a chorus because it started out as literally like 50 people that were standing off to the side, and they would sing certain things to the audience about what was happening, because there were only about 3 characters in these ancient plays. I mean, it was just 3 people, and they each had multiple parts. So in order for the audience to understand what was happening, they had these other people just hanging out over on the side explaining. I don't know why they didn't just add more characters personally, but eventually it evolved into like these characters, 1 or 2 of them, or a smaller number of them playing this role. And also because George Lucas was influenced by like the Hidden Fortress, there's those 2 characters in there. They're like two peasants, and you can actually show like a side by side of like the two peasants talking to each other or their interaction, and then like C-3PO and R2 like on Tatooine. It's like the same thing. So Lucas obviously pulled from some of this stuff to create these characters, and throughout the prequel movies, you know, the trilogy, they're often doing this. Like they're in the story, but they're also kind of like hanging back and commenting on what's happening.
Yeah, we kind of see a bit of the story, like almost like, I mean, not through their eyes, but like we're almost like viewing it through their experience. And, you know, they make them bicker with each other, and they make them have like relatable personalities. So that, yeah, that's an interesting point, that they're the connection between us and the rest of the main characters.
Yeah. Well, and I've always wondered this, and it's not just droids. There's a lot of characters like C-3PO, and Chewbacca comes to mind, which is like they have vocalizations that some characters just seem to understand magically, and others who can't really understand what they're saying. So like R2-D2 beeps a lot, and then obviously C-3PO knows because he knows over 6 million forms of communication. But other characters also seem to just know what R2 is saying.
Yeah, they all just, you know, this farm boy just speaks binary, you know, like or whatever you know, form of language he's using. You know, it's one thing when Luke is like in the X-wing and R2's talking to him through his little screen and he's like writing things out. But like, yeah, there's plenty of other times that R2 just beeps and they're like, you know what, I was thinking the same thing. And you know, and they just like move on as if he didn't just beep twice and you acted like he said a whole sentence.
Yeah, and then when it doesn't serve the story, like it's some enemy soldier or whatever, and the droid beeps. He's like, what are you saying? Like, what are you talking about, you silly droid? You know, and then they don't understand what the droid is trying to say.
Right.
It's just this weird thing. It's one of the many things about Star Wars that's just not really explained. It's not really scientifically accurate, whatever.
Yeah, that's one thing I actually like about, not to take a little tangent, but that's actually one thing I really enjoy about characters like R2-D2 and C-3PO, R2-D2 and Chewbacca, is like they don't always completely spell out what they said. You kind of like figure it out through context sometimes, like whatever this person said in response to them, you can kind of fill in the gaps with, oh, he must have said something along these lines. And sometimes what you assume they said might not be the same as what someone else or what I assume they said, you know. And I actually think that is a really cool thing to do, as long as it's not all over the place. You know, it's just a couple characters.
Yeah, well, and it's like it's kind of like the horror film thing where a monster is more scary when you don't see it. You know, when you just, it's kind of the psychological thing. You just hear it growling, or there's just like these camera things, and it's your mind kind of fills in what it's supposed to be, and it's kind of the same concept. You know, it's amusing specifically to you in a specific way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of being scary because and you're filling in with what's supposed to be scary, you're filling it in now with what's supposed to be amusing.
Or cute or endearing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the role that droids play in Star Wars is like many. There are like protocol droids, you know, R2 is an astromech droid. Like they're engineering, like they do skunt work, you know, they're servers, you know, in some cases they're like one of them torturing, like
yeah, they got torturers in like Jabba's palace, and interestingly, they're torturing other droids. We'll save that for when we get to the darker part of this podcast. You got like miners, like you got the those droids that are carrying like lava around on Mustafar. You know, I oftentimes like to think about like what would my life be like if I was in Star Wars. And, you know, I'd love to say, oh, I'd be a Jedi. But, I mean, in reality, I'd like to think I'd at least be something similar to what I do now. But, like, you got the 2-1B medic droid that is doing my job. Like, it's kind of like in iRobot, like when Will Smith is walking around and seeing, like, all the droids doing everyone's job. and he just has this like negative feeling toward them because I don't know, just how they've taken over everything. You see the droids are garbage men, the droids are mailmen, the droids are like taking everybody's jobs, and I'm like, what would I even do if I was in Star Wars? I mean, I don't know what job I would get to have. They're all taken by droids.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder what all the people in Star Wars do for a living. You know, we see them sitting around at diners and cantinas. Like, what do all of you guys do? Because that person's a server and that person, yeah.
Yeah, I actually never really thought about that. I mean, they have a lot of people around just hanging out, but it's like, what is your job other than being a bounty hunter?
Right.
Or like, you know what I mean? Or being in some kind of religious sect with light swords.
Right.
Or, you know.
Or being in the military.
Or being a slave.
Or being a slave, or
maybe most of it's just like 90% enslaved and then just 10%.
Right. Well, I mean, again, like hypothetically, slavery is supposed to be outlawed in the Republic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, slavery should only be a thing on like the Outer Rim worlds.
Yeah.
You know, what do all these people do for a living? All the jobs you see are taken by droids.
I know, right? And so, well, it's like we keep skirting around this area that we want to get into.
Yeah.
You know, which is like, I think of Anakin and Shmi. I mean, they have jobs, but they're not really jobs because they don't have any choice in doing what they're doing. And so it's like they're basically serving the purpose of a droid.
Right.
They are no better than a droid in that way. And so we have the medical droids like Nick was talking about, but you know, there's battle droids too. I mean, they use them for war,
right, as
well.
I mean, I know you do see soldiers that are actual living people. In the Clone Wars, they were just clones. So you still can't be enlisted if you want to fight for the Republic in the Clone Wars because they use clones for it. But I mean, the Empire did get rid of clones and they started using actual people. So not that the clones are not actual people, but
what do you mean, you people?
But you know what I mean. They started using organically bred people.
They're not even bred; they're grown.
Right. But yeah, there's not a lot of options. I mean, I guess maybe they still need some medical personnel that are not so rigid because that surgical droid, medical droid, whatever that you see in the original trilogy, I actually have a toy of it. It looks so like clunky, like it's definitely not like a field medic.
Yeah,
like the way he gets around he's not particularly mobile. So I mean, I guess we can assume that sometimes those other jobs are out there. I mean, in the Clone Wars, they had a clone medic and they had a clone for every job in the Clone Wars. So I guess it's just personal choice of like whether the employer wants to pay for a person or wants to pay for a droid. I wonder what the cost difference is. If it's cheaper to buy a droid and then never have to pay them, or if it's cheaper to pay a person for a long period of time.
Well, it's sort of like the B1 droid. It's so cheaply manufactured, you can just destroy so many of them, but you can create them faster and cheaper than they can be destroyed.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, you could think of it that way.
And then you don't have to send your people to war because you know, it's actually better for the people who are supposed to be like, who this army is supposed to be fighting for.
They're drones.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we use drones.
But they also feel things. So it's sad.
And we laugh.
Yeah,
but but herein lies the issue right here is that droids are used as a punchline in many cases, and the punchline is that they're being blown up and ran over and destroyed in humorous ways, and we are meant to laugh as the audience.
Yeah.
But also they have feelings.
Right, and they do think for themselves, despite what Obi-Wan says in Episode 2. You know, he's like, oh, if droids can think, that there'd be none of us here. Well, Obi-Wan, like...
They can think.
They do think. They make, like, educated decisions, like, not based on programming. Like, they definitely have emotions. I mean, and some even complex emotions. In that video that Alex brought up earlier, what's it called? The tragedy of droids in Star Wars?
Yes.
Okay. Just you guys should go watch that video because it's really well done. I forgot who did it, but it's called the tragedy of droids in Star Wars.
It's Pop Culture Detective.
Okay.
Is the channel. Yeah, I'll put a link so that you guys can go look.
But they actually, and this is brought up in that video, that they can feel pretty complex emotions too. It's not just like happy, sad, like even guilt. Like when C-3PO thinks they all died in the trash compactor, he's like, "Oh, it's my fault," and that's guilt. That's actually a complex emotion. Like you're not just sad that they're gone. You're blaming yourself for it, and then now you're gonna have to live with that. Like and even that scene is total, comedy for us.
Yeah.
Because they're all screaming out of happiness that he stopped it, and he thinks that they're dead, and so we all laugh that the droid is thinking the wrong thing and he's blaming himself. But it's the fact that they can think this much really makes so much of the comedic stuff really sad if you choose to sit there and think about it. We just choose not to. As Star Wars fans, we choose not to sit and think about it. But
and honestly, I didn't even look at it in that way until I watched this video that you showed me. And honestly, I think that's what it is for most people. They just don't really, they never stop to look at it. It's just like a laugh and we move on. That's all that they're meant for. But if you actually sit there and you're like, wait a minute, why are we all laughing at this poor droid that's screaming, getting tortured? Yeah, and it really is a good video because for the first 5-10 minutes of it, because it's like a half-hour video. For the first 5-10 minutes of it, I was like, this is kind of a stretch. And then he keeps talking, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Yeah. But they want us to laugh when they want us to laugh, and they want us to feel bad for the droids when they want us to feel bad. Like the whole droids being tortured in Jabba's palace thing, that part's not really comedy. We're like, oh, this is not a good place for our beloved C-3PO and R2-D2 to be in right now. And the gonk droid that's getting his feet burned, he's yelling in pain. That's not something that they don't program a gonk droid to feel pain or to fake feeling pain. So he must be feeling pain, actual pain. That's the only explanation. Yes. And it is dark in the sense that, this could happen to C-3PO or R2. But I do think that moment, even it's supposed to get a laugh. No, ah! And then he gets burned. And then it's ha.
Stupid trash can droid.
Yeah. Stupid trash can. Burn. But okay, so you were talking about sentience. As I understand it, it's they periodically mind wipe these droids. That's sort of their recourse because if left literally to their own devices, they will evolve and develop a personality eventually. Right. Right? That's kind of the way it works. If there is a logic in Star Wars, it's that. And so they're not created with these personalities. They develop one through experiences, much like a human does, like a child does. Yeah, like a child does throughout their life. Their personality is what it is because of their experiences that they've had since they were born. And the droids get periodically wiped so that they don't have those experiences and therefore don't develop a personality and don't think for themselves. Right. Which would sort of explain the inconsistency in why certain droids seem like automatons, why they don't seem to have, they don't have a soul, basically. And then other ones are totally almost flesh and blood characters with, the ability to communicate feelings, all of that stuff. Right. Although, this is the answer we've been given by Star Wars, that this is what they say is why some develop personalities and others don't. But 3PO does get his mind wiped completely at the end of episode 3. And even though he has no memories, he's still the same droid in episode 4. And all that was a writing decision so that C-3PO can't then tell, because he's going to have all this knowledge about Anakin and about all those things that happened, but we're trying to get ourselves out of a hole
Yeah, they very specifically chose to say at the end of 3 how the protocol droid's mind wiped, and they don't say anything about R2. That way, R2 remembers in episode 4, and 3PO doesn't. That they had to do that because of the already written plot of the trilogy.
Yeah. But so, and you and I were talking about this, so R2 does know, but he chooses not to say anything. And why is that?
Because R2 ain't no snitch.
Because R2 ain't no snitch.
That is a direct quote. You heard it here. R2 ain't no snitch. That is, but really that's what it comes down to, okay?
Snitches get restraining bolts.
Yes, because it's funny to say, but that legitimately is what it comes down to, okay? The real reason R2 didn't spew anything like in episode 4 when he's with Obi-Wan and Luke is because, again, the prequels hadn't been written yet. But I saw this Reddit post and I can't find it. I was trying to find it before we did this podcast so I could actually like quote it directly, but I couldn't find it, so I'm just gonna have to paraphrase it. Basically, this guy's talking about how rather than just, say, oh, well, it's because they're written backwards and move on. He writes this whole thing out about how he actually like watches those scenes differently now with the idea that R2 knows and Obi-Wan knows R2 knows. Because Obi-Wan, when he's like, I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid. And it's true, even though there's no way this could have been the reasoning because the prequels hadn't been written yet, Obi-Wan gives R2 a look as he says that. Like, I'm not ready to tell him everything yet. So leave it this way.
Right.
And again, there's no way that was the directing reason. But that's the way we can look at it now. And it's true. He gives them this like smirk, like, no, I know. And I know you know. But just wait, because I'm not going to tell him everything. But then, so because of that, R2 then doesn't tell Luke that Darth Vader is his father, which he definitely knows.
Yeah.
He never brings up anything to 3PO about 3PO being created by Anakin and all this stuff, which R2 definitely knows.
Yeah.
But this goes on for a long period of time. In episode 6, like when they land, in episode 5, when they land on Dagobah, R2 definitely knows who Yoda is.
Yeah.
And he just ain't no snitch. And clearly, Yoda doesn't want to tell Luke yet. So R2's like, all right, well, he don't want to tell him, so I'm not going to tell him. Clearly, he's hiding this, so I'm just going to see how this plans out. And then, when Luke goes and exiles himself just before the sequels, and R2 gets a map to Luke, he is so determined to not be no snitch that he powers down for years. That he's like, I'm not going to tell anyone where Luke is. And I am the only one that has the other half of the map to where Luke is. So just to make sure I don't do that, I'm shutting off. And he just shuts off and he doesn't turn on again until the end of episode, like right at the end of episode 7.
Yeah.
So like that's like the biggest, like most important piece to R2's character is he ain't no snitch.
Now, do you think that bit about him shutting himself off, did the writers do that for that exact reason?
I don't think so.
No?
No, that's just what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, and I've seen other people say it, so I'm just going with that.
It has been well established, even within the writing circles, that he ain't no snitch. Therefore, whatever he appears in, we have this in mind.
Right. Yeah. I really don't think that was the reason. I think they gave other reasoning. It's been a while since I've watched the sequel movies, but I think they gave some other reason as to why he shut down. I think it was like, interestingly enough, while we're talking about emotions, I think it might have been like a depression thing.
Really?
I want to say like he shut down because he was sad Luke was gone. I might be making that up, but I don't know. I know they gave a reason.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my reason, but I think that's the reason.
I think your reason is funnier.
Yeah. And better. Makes more sense based on his previous actions.
It does. You can track it through all the movies, all those instances you just gave.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I think a big part of the issues, because it really does, I mean, we can go a little deeper into like the social commentary, like the unintentional social commentary that ends up being in Star Wars because of the droids. A a lot of it arises out of the inconsistency with which the droids are portrayed, and we talked about the sentience thing, and through experience, they kind of like develop a soul, basically a personality and everything. But it's not always, just like with C-3PO, he seems to just be his normal self, not too much later after that, his mind wipe. So I really just think that from movie to movie, from writer to writer, from whatever to whatever, they serve whatever purpose they need to be right at that moment. We want you to feel upset. We want you to empathize. We want you to laugh. Like, all these things. Then that's what they'll be right at that moment.
Right. You watch them die, and you're just like, even when you think a character, like a droid that you loved, dies, even when you think they died. And the example I'm thinking of is when K2SO is shot, the other lookalike K2SO is shot in Rogue One,
right?
And then ends up not being K2SO, and he comes around the corner and he's like, "Did you know that was me?" Or did you know that wasn't me? Yeah. And K2SO is like my favorite droid ever.
Mine too.
And when I thought that she had shot him, I was like, no, but I wasn't like as distraught as I might have been had he been a flesh and blood character. Because he's a robot. And I was like, oh, well, he's a droid. But really, based on everything we've said so far, we should think of them the same way. And I mean, I try to now, after seeing this video and having these conversations with you, but I still struggle to see them like as the flesh and blood characters that we've definitely made them out to be.
Well, and this gets into a bias that people have, which is that something has more value if it's organic.
Right.
Right? And then, I mean, sort of the same thing, which is like, I see certain droids in the universe as pets, or as like a dog, and like your faithful dog. Like, that's how I would see R2. I know he has more personality than that. Obviously, he has more intelligence because he does these complex things. But he seems like a lapdog, kind of like, that rolls around with you, whereas C-3PO is anthropomorphic, and he's more like a human.
I actually never viewed R2 as like a pet. I always viewed him as more of like one of the more human characters. However, like BB-8, they purposefully make him like a pet. I mean, when Poe like runs to him and he's like, "Oh, I missed you," he's like, it's actually weird to me. It's a weird scene to me. He's like scratching his belly, like his ball that he rolls around on. He's like petting it, scratching it in this weird way, like it's his pet. But it's weird because it looks so weird to me. I've never been able to get over that scene. And it's just like a quick little like 5-second thing, but it's just so weird to me. And then D.O. in episode 9, one of the only good things to come out of episode 9, frankly. They talk about how like he's kind of like shying away from everyone and pulling back from everyone. And then I think it's Rey's like, "Oh, I think someone's treated him poorly." Like he's a dog that's been abused.
Yeah, he's got like PTSD.
And he's got, exactly.
Yeah.
And so clearly the writers view the astromech droids and other small droids the same way you have, as they're like pets.
Yeah. Well, and even just listening to the both of us speak right now, the fact that sometimes we use the word die and sometimes we use the word destroyed interchangeably sort of proves that point, is that we say something is destroyed or something died, which is what we use for something that's alive.
Yeah, because like I said, like when you think one of your favorite droids dies, I was talking about K2SO.
Yeah. But
I would never say that about a battle droid.
Yeah.
For like a separatist battle droid. I would say that they're destroyed.
Yeah.
But there's one that like he's right about to get blown up in Clone Wars. And he's like, "I just got a promotion," and then dies.
Yeah.
And it's like, he was really happy to have this promotion. And like, he's moving up in the world, in the droid world, as much as he's allowed to move up.
Yeah.
Being a lower class citizen.
Yeah.
And then he gets blown up, and we all just laugh at it. It's like, droid just got a promotion, now he's dead. But no, he's not dead. He was destroyed because he's a battle droid.
Yes.
And we don't view them as being alive.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and again, I never noticed, and maybe that makes me biased, and I assume for that reason then most other people also didn't notice. But in retrospect, I'm like, wait a minute. The entire Clone War happens against a droid army. There's a very specific reason for that. Is that so you don't feel sympathy for them when they're destroyed, and I say destroyed, not died, killed. Right? They're not killed in a war, they're destroyed.
Because that's the whole reason they did it.
Yeah.
So you're not watching people die. You're watching machines be destroyed.
Yes, and then on the other side you have clones. And in the Clone Wars, in the series, they went out of their way to humanize the clones. But during the movies, they did not. Not really.
Right. But there is that one scene in Clone Wars where Yoda is like talking to all the different clones, and he's like, and Cody, you're like this, and Jesse, you're like this. I don't remember who all was there, but he talks about how they're all different because they're all talking about how they're not. And Yoda is making the point to them, like, he's like, no, you guys are individual people.
Yeah. Well, and I think the writers realized, wait a minute, we have to humanize these people. Like, it's really terrible that we created clones on one side and droids on the other because we wanted to have our cake and eat it too. We wanted to have a cool giant war, but also not all the things that come along with having a big, grueling war.
Yeah, because at first, before they go out of their way to humanize them in Clone Wars, and you're watching them in Attack of the Clones, you definitely didn't care when the droids got blown up, but you didn't even really care when you saw, I don't know, maybe I'm different, but I didn't even really care when I saw clones getting like shot and blown up because I was like, oh, well, they were clones.
I didn't either. I don't think you're not meant to.
But like, they actually are organic. They are anatomically and physiologically the same as a human being. They just grew faster. They feel pain, like actual physical pain.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, and it's like, it's pretty gruesome. But then it was already gruesome with the clones, and then you add to the fact that those droids are thinking and don't want to die. Yeah.
I mean, at that point, it's just, and this is where the bias comes back. Since they're organic, then we feel like we're supposed to feel more for them.
Yeah.
But at that point, as a writing decision, we can call them clones to knock them down a peg, even though they're organic. But at that point, they're basically just organic droids, really.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But then they still have them be on the winning side. That way, they can have more deaths on the other side,
right,
and have them be people you don't care about at all.
Right.
Because like some of those scenes in the Battle of Geonosis in Episode 2, like they're just bombs dropped on whole armies of droids. And I mean, I can just imagine if they had swapped all those droids for people, like it probably would have been an R-rated movie.
R rating, yeah.
Yeah. And like it would have been like, the opening, like the shore scene in Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Because they're not worth as much, because they're just...
But when you sit around and think about it, is it?
Yeah.
Is it really the same?
And then it depends, again, on if this is a living, breathing, not breathing, but, just they have sentience, basically.
Yeah, they do. Even the B-1 battle droids that are strictly designed to be something that is to be destroyed by the good guys. Like, that's their whole purpose, is just to be there to be destroyed by the good guys. They, especially in the Clone Wars, give them personalities. And it's just really heavy if you actually sit around and ponder it.
See, and that is so weird to me, because I think it was a good thing that in the Clone Wars series, they humanized the clones, but they even went further in the opposite direction with the droids, because it's like, okay, let's also give them personality and also make it funny that they die.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
They then give the clones personality so that you care when they die. You give the droids personality so that it's funny when they die.
It's even funnier when they die.
Yeah. It's so messed up.
It's really messed up. Holy crap.
And they do not want to die.
Yeah.
Like they are afraid of the Jedi. Yeah. They don't want to be in the situation, but they've been built for this situation. If they had given them a little bit of personality, but also made them like be like, oh yeah, well, my purpose is still to kill and be killed. But that's not what they did. They also made them like fear death.
Yeah.
Which is not helping this situation.
I know.
I actually really don't like that decision that they made. I don't like that. That's actually my one complaint. Like, I really have no complaints about the Clone Wars series. That's my one complaint. Is that the battle droids have personalities. First of all, I just don't really like the personalities they gave them, but that's because it's a kids show. They very much like, it's just kind of childish humor, and that's fine. But I don't really like the personalities they gave them, but it was a good writing decision. They could have actually like justified themselves by saying some droids have personalities and some droids don't. And the B1 battle droids don't have personalities. That's why this is all okay. They could have easily justified that. I thought it was a great decision.
Yeah. So they're being destroyed. They're not being killed. An important distinction, or at least that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And that's really how it was for the most part in episode 2. You do have the one droid that gets put on C-3PO's body.
Yes.
And he kind of has a personality about it, but he's more just confused about why he's not working properly than really having a real personality. And that is funny. That scene's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, giving them more personality, I really, really did not like that writing decision.
Well, and it was just for laughs, for entertainment. Again, they're comic relief characters.
Right.
Most of the time.
But, in episode 9, C-3PO is going to have his mind wiped. And it actually is kind of sad. In episode 9, when they're going to wipe C-3PO's mind or like his whole everything, so that I think it's so that they can get to that Sith thing. You actually are, like, everyone in the theater, I think, was pretty sad. Like, no, don't wipe C-3PO's everything. Like,
well, you're supposed to feel sad.
We love him, like, and they've chosen for that to be sad for us. And we're like, no, we love him. We want him to keep his memories. We want him to be a part of this Star Wars family that has been created. But then when they do wipe his mind, because R2 like backed it up or whatever, they do wipe his mind, and he comes back and he's like even slightly more annoying. Poe immediately makes a joke about it. And he's like, okay, this is going to be a problem because C-3PO is being more annoying now than ever.
Yeah.
We were just sad 10 seconds ago in that scene. And then his mind gets wiped and C-3PO makes a joke, and then we all laugh. And then Poe makes a joke, and then we all laugh.
Yeah.
It's like in that one scene, we see them having their cake and eating it too. Like the perfect example. Everyone's sad about C-3PO, and then everyone laughs at C-3PO.
Well, and it's for a universe that can be so inconsistent, this is such a consistent thing across all of Star Wars media. And it's just like, maybe it's this unsaid thing. Honestly, I think it's because it's human nature. And the writers don't talk to each other about this. It's just this sort of thing that comes out that we want to laugh, and droids are a very easy tool to make people laugh.
Yeah, and I don't think the writers are cynical. I don't think they have any idea that
I don't either.
That they're creating this tragic thing. I mean, if they did, they wouldn't have done it. That's certainly not their intention. It's only that way when you sit and think about it for an extended period of time. The writers didn't think this is sad. The writers think about droids the same way they want us to think about droids, which is they're alive when we want them to appear alive, but they're really not alive. Yeah.
Well, and it's like there's an area here that it's like we can't ignore because it's really, it's really what this is an allegory for, which is they're an oppressed class. They're slaves. I mean, let's just call it what it is. In many cases, they're slaves.
They are, and I mean when the Jawas are selling 3PO and R2D2 in episode 4 to Luke and Owen, I mean if you were to put that scene side by side with like a slave auction, that's what it looks like. I mean they're all standing in a line, and you're like, oh, which slave do I want to buy?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
It's totally the same thing. And what's even more sad, you know, with their whole oppression thing, is they've been gaslighted into thinking that they're not alive.
Yeah.
Because an example of this is IG-11 in The Mandalorian, when Din Djarin is like, no living thing has ever seen me without my helmet since I swore the creed. And IG-11 says, well, that's okay. I'm not a living thing. But he totally is sentient.
Yeah.
So all the droids have been gaslighted into thinking, have been, you know, manipulated into thinking that they're not alive and therefore they don't have the worth of organic species.
Yeah, I mean, I think C-3PO is a good example of that. He's so self-loathing. It's really sad. You know what I mean? He's always cowering. He's always, you know, and I think George Lucas, I mean, he used this, like, honestly, I think in the right way during the trilogy. Like when they're walking into the cantina and he says directly, we don't serve their kind here. You know, I mean, that's like obvious discrimination. And, you know, C-3PO doesn't put up a fight at all, you know, and Luke is just like, we don't want any trouble. Why don't you go wait outside? And he's like, I totally agree with you, sir. I'm going to walk outside.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because he knows his place.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And to put it that way it's just messed up.
It's heavy, dude. Like when you really, really think about it.
And you even have other droids oppressing other droids, you know, and you have, I don't even remember what episode it's in, but there's a droid bartender and he's like, hey, no droids.
Yes.
And R2D2 has to, it's in episode 2. R2D2 is going to get drinks for Anakin and Padme or whatever. And the droid tells R2, the droid who's serving them tells R2, hey, no droids.
Yeah.
So like they even have the droids oppressing the other droids.
We have the server oppressing the droid below him whilst he is also being a servant
right
to someone above him. Yeah, it's pretty sad, you know, and it's used very often throughout the universe. They're obviously a subclass, you know, and there was one droid, and they talk about it in this video, which is in Solo, and I can never remember. And it's her.
Yep, it's her. It's not an it.
It's a female.
It's a her.
It's a female voice.
L337.
Yes.
And it took them all the way up until the Solo movie to recognize what they've created for Star Wars writers, and you know, for them to recognize what they've done to droids. They make L337 like a droid activist,
right?
Fighting for droids' rights,
right? Okay, so basically, L337 was an astromech at one point, right?
Yeah, which they don't really go into this in Solo, but this is canon explained elsewhere.
Right, and so she at some point develops to the point where she decides she doesn't want to be subjugated anymore, and she starts pulling her parts off and adding anthropomorphic parts. She starts adding arms and legs.
Yeah.
Until when we see her in Solo, she has arms and legs and she is more human-like.
Yeah. That's tragic to think about. Like, I don't want to be this. I'm going to change myself physically. I'm going to pull parts of my body off of me and put other things on me so that I can be like the upper class. So I can be like those who are oppressing me because I don't want to be like this.
Right. Well, and this is a bias. We see something that looks more human to have more value or to be more human-like because it has arms and legs and looks like us.
Yeah. L337 went from pet to person because she put on arms and legs.
Yeah.
And got English instead of beeps.
Yeah. So she had a vocoder and then she could speak.
Right.
Yes. But she, you know, like in that video, because I do want to credit this video because a lot of, especially this part we're talking about is from this video. her activism is also used as a punchline. It's like, which is a general problem in media, is that when someone, sort of starts talking about the actual issue and they start trying to fight back, everyone is meant to roll their eyes and laugh.
Right. We do like I know when I walked out of that theater, I think probably and I'm almost ashamed to say this now, I think I thought L337 was the most annoying character in that movie. Because I walked out of theater and I was like, this like droid social justice warrior is just annoying me. I'm like, come on, they're droids. And then I saw this video like a few years later.
Yeah.
I'm like, crap.
Yeah. We were wrong.
L337 was right. But then she decides that she decides she's going to be a droid activist. Like she decides that that's her calling. She's going to fight for what's right. And the moment she finds that that's her calling, she dies in Solo. Well, I mean, she doesn't die because then they end up putting her consciousness in the Falcon. But she's shut down immediately, and it's never revisited.
Yeah, God, it's been so long since I've seen Solo. Did it even mean anything? Like, did her death?
I don't remember the scene. This is actually talked about directly in the video we're talking about. So if you want the actual detail to what I'm about to say, go watch The Tragedy of Droids on YouTube. But all I remember is that her death that could have been sad was immediately overshadowed by something else sadder. I don't remember what it was, but they cut away to something else. They cut away to, I don't remember if it's like Han being shot or something.
You know what it is? Because I was just watching it. It's Han Solo's first time flying the Millennium Falcon.
That's what it is. Yeah, it's immediately over. Like, it was almost sad. It was almost done right. And then they immediately changed the scene to Han flying the Falcon for the first time. And it's such this iconic, important thing.
Yes, it's this fan service. Like, it's the first time.
Yeah, forget about her.
Yeah.
This is more important.
Yeah, it just pushes the narrative forward but forget about whatever she was trying to do.
And it's funny because L337's the whole reason she was even like created was to give an answer to one specific line in, I think it's A New Hope, is when C-3PO is like, he's saying that the Falcon, like, he's like, I don't know where your ship learned to communicate, but it has a very peculiar dialect.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the whole reason L337 was created, was to give a reason for that, for C-3PO saying that. But they made her this, what could have been a very important character for the world of Star Wars, for the galaxy of Star Wars, and then kill her and then have Han fly the Falcon and then we forget about her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, they can't do that because droids serve a very important purpose in the universe. They're there for laughs.
Right.
And many, many narrative reasons. They need a droid to show up at a certain moment to save someone. I don't know how many times R2 or Chopper has come in and they have their little probe that comes out and opens a door somewhere.
Yeah, because for whatever reason, like every door ever can be opened by that little spinny thing they have.
That little prong.
And Chopper's doesn't even fit.
Yeah.
Chopper's, he just like closes his little hand and puts it in the little spinny thing. And it's like someone just took a flathead screwdriver and just put it in there. Like anyone could have turned this if Chopper's little hand thing fits.
Yeah.
It's almost like any like screwdriver or anything could fit into these little things that turn the doors.
Right.
But, because Chopper's little pliers hand thing works on them. But it's always the droid that has to do it. Like the droid is the one that has to either operate this door or crane or, deactivate this bomb or whatever, because they all have this same, like, what almost seems to be the equivalent of Star Wars USB port.
Yes.
Like that the droids have the right, inlet for it.
Yeah, which again, the only reason is that it serves the story.
Yeah. But like you said earlier, droids are whatever they need to be in that moment. Whether it's something sad, something funny, usually something funny.
Yeah.
But whether it's something sad, something funny, the hero, the tool they need, in that moment, the whatever, they become what they need to become, at any point in the series, and that's why they're so important to the series.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about there's the whole underclass, even slavery angle to it. But even the ones that are like thought of as, our friends, they're on the good, C-3PO, R2, Chopper, like all these, they're still just constantly disrespected. And we just accept that just because of the way the characters treat them. They just like come in and just like, shut up. Somebody shut him off.
Yeah.
Shut him down, or like they put their hand over their mouth, or, they're just constantly, and you never really notice it. Like I've gone back and I'm like, they're just talking so much shit about these droids.
They are straight up disrespected at every moment, especially in the original trilogy, I would say. Like especially C-3PO in particular, because even the main characters love R2, but C-3PO in particular is just treated like garbage again and again, and he's so helpful so many times, but like the moment he stops being helpful, like, can somebody shut him up?
Yeah, it's like they wouldn't say that to like an organic character.
No, I think even if they had an organic character that was just as annoying as C-3PO is written to be, I still think they wouldn't have the characters speak to him that way. I think they might have the characters roll their eyes, be annoyed by him, maybe say something even behind their back. But no writer, I don't think, would have made the characters be that directly disrespectful to the character had he not been a robot.
Yeah, but it's, since they're a robot, then we are allowed to treat them a certain way. And we as the audience just accept it as okay.
Yeah. And I do want to say one thing, like, before we're completely off this subject. I actually think, like, we're talking about how messed up it is and how tragic it is, but I actually think that stepping away from, actually sitting and pondering it and thinking about how tragic it is, just stepping away from that, it's really done very, very well. It's almost ingenious the way they've used droids successfully in this way.
Yeah.
Because when we sit here and think about it, it's messed up. But from a writing standpoint, it is so smart because they were able to give us so much with so little risk. And I think, like, I really think objectively it was done really, really well, even though all these points we've made.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was executed, for lack of a better word. It was executed very well.
Yeah, because they did do all of what we're saying they did. They did get to have their cake and eat it too. Most people are not going to sit here and think about this the way we've thought about this. Most people, unfortunately, probably aren't going to stumble upon that YouTube video that we're talking about. And they're just going to laugh when they're told to laugh and be sad when they're supposed to be sad. And usually it's laugh when you're supposed to laugh. And also care about them as characters. It's really well done.
Yeah.
It's messed up, but it's really well done.
They got us, dude.
Yeah. Got us good.
They got us good. And they would still be getting us if we hadn't, become a little more enlightened.
Yeah. And I'd be lying if I said the next time I watch a new piece of Star Wars media, I'd be lying if I said I'm not still gonna feel that way a little bit. Because when I'm watching Star Wars, I'm just enjoying watching Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm just going to sit there and watch it and enjoy it. So I'm probably not going to have these thoughts, at least until after I've watched whatever comes out next. Maybe when I go back and watch it, I'll think about it, but they'll probably still continue to get me.
Yeah.
Like over and over again, I'm still probably going to laugh when I'm told to laugh at something happening to a droid.
Yeah.
And I'll think about how that was messed up later.
Well, and it's like once I started looking at it in this way, it really made me wonder, like, what does it say about people that we would do such a thing? Even if it was unintentional, because I really do honestly believe that the people who created droids, I mean, George Lucas created the droids, but all the people who came after that, they really didn't understand the way it was coming across if you actually look at it. So then what does that say about people? That we think it's funny that a certain group of people are worth less than other people, and when they are injured or they are made fun of or whatever, it's funny.
And it's not, I'm going to take this a step further, and unfortunately, maybe to a little bit of a darker place.
How much darker can we get?
Unfortunately, it's not just because of what they're made of. It's not just because they're inorganic. It really is because of how they look.
Yeah.
I mean, because like you said, the more anthropomorphic they are, the more we view them as a person. R2-D2 is still made of metal and wires, and C-3PO is still made of metal and wires. But because C-3PO looks more like a person, we find him more, valuable per se, you could say. And then to take it a step further than that, if anyone is a Next Generation, a Star Trek Next Generations fan, Data, I never ever don't view Data as a crew member on the Starship Enterprise. He's always a crew member to me, and you don't see the other characters disrespecting him. But he's still not an organic being. I mean, he looks like a person because he's an android that's designed to look like a person. So he even has this, the fake skin on him and everything. And it makes the other characters not disrespect him, and it makes us. And there is a whole episode where they do debate whether or not he's property or a person or whatever. That's a whole episode in Star Trek, and that's also talked about in the video that Alex and I have been talking about for this podcast. But just from a strictly talking about the way they look, Data looks like a person, so we view him as a person, even though he's a robot. Not any less robot really than C-3PO is.
Yeah.
But we view Data as more of a person than C-3PO, and we view C-3PO as more of a person than R2-D2.
Yes.
And it is because of how they look. It's not just because they're inorganic, because that just proves it. We find these beings less valuable because of how they look. That says a lot about us.
Yes, about how, generally speaking, narcissistic we can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up because I had forgotten about Data. And I've mentioned before that I'm a big Star Trek fan in addition to Star Wars. But this is one area where Star Trek really is ahead of Star Wars, and that episode that you were talking about, is a very early on in the show. It was the first or second season. And I think at some point the writers realized, wait a minute, there is an issue that we need to settle if we're going to move forward in the show with a character who is an android. And that is that he works for Starfleet and he's not a person, at least he's not organic. Is he then the property of Starfleet as, say, the ship is? Or is he a person who is a member of the crew? And so they wrote this entire episode that would settle this, literally at a trial, basically, because there's a scientist who wants to take him apart, basically, and see how he works, but it would destroy him. And so then on the other side, it's no, you can't destroy him because that would be murder, because he's a person. And so they actually had to go back and forth, debating whether or not he is a person. And then at the end, he is. He has a personality. He thinks, therefore he is. That whole thing.
And I don't mean to circle back.
It's okay.
To my other point about Data, about it being all about looks. But just another point about it, again, being all about looks. C-3PO has way more of a personality than Data does. And Data acts much more like a robot than C-3PO.
Yeah.
C-3PO is probably one of the most emotional characters in all of Star Wars. And Data is a very robot-like for looking so human.
Yeah.
He thinks, therefore he's sentient, but he really is not. He doesn't really have much emotion. I mean,
he doesn't have any emotion.
He doesn't have any emotion. Yeah, Q has to give him a laugh, in that one episode as a gift because he can't experience those things. But yeah, there's another point that it comes down to looks, but
yeah, well, and it's these competing biases because what we would see as being more human or more valuable, emotion is one of those defining characteristics. Whether something is emotional, we would then have feelings for it. Like even an animal, which is feeling pain, is feeling whatever, we value that. We we empathize with that, I should say. Data is written specifically to have no emotions, yet he looks more human. C-3PO doesn't look as human as Data, but he has more emotions. You see what I'm saying? And yet Data has more value in Star Trek. And so it says that even what something looks like is even more important than whether or not they can feel something.
Exactly.
That's how hard that bias is, that they need to look like us.
Yeah. It's almost racist. That's what
we're talking about.
They look like us, so they're more valuable.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's like when you really start to go deeper and you're like, why did they make these decisions throughout the entire Star Wars universe? And it's like, we really do have these biases that we don't even think about, and we just take it as funny.
Right.
It's
getting deep, but it says a lot about human nature, I guess.
Yeah.
That we feel this way and we're just okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, we create stories that reflect that, and
we don't even realize it until years later.
And it's popular on a massive scale.
Yeah.
We always talk about Star Wars having a wide appeal because the youngest child, that's able to watch something to the oldest person will laugh, will have the same reaction because we have our hardwired programming to a certain degree. Ironically enough,
yeah,
use that phrase.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like we've made most of our points about this. I don't want to beat it to death. I feel like we should at least end on like maybe a higher note. Like maybe we should just go out talking about some of our favorite droids or something.
I think this is the good stuff personally. This is again why I like Star Wars, because it's so relatable to the real world.
Yeah.
I mean, what else can you say? I mean, it is pretty dark when you think about it.
No, it is. But, it is. I guess.
Also, we have our favorite droids, buddy. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, I don't know. We can just.
Well, no, I mean, okay. So, you mentioned K2SO. Why is he your favorite droid?
I don't know. I just think he's hilarious. I just like that scene where you think he got shot and he just walks out. Did you know that wasn't me? And it's just funny. And you know what? His death actually is very sad.
Yeah.
I actually I talked about how I wasn't like all that crazily distraught when I thought he was dead in that scene. But actually when he does die, I actually was very sad.
Which it's supposed to be.
His death actually is very sad. That's another example of where they make a droid's death matter more than other droids' deaths because they made him a character you were going to care about.
Well, you have the same reaction as the rest of the characters because all of the main characters die in that movie.
Right.
And he is just another one of the characters. It just so happens he's a robot.
Right.
Because in that context, in that movie, he is just another character. Right?
Yeah.
He's like the top level. We like him the most because he's the most human.
Yeah.
Played by Alan Tudyk, who we really like.
Alan Tudyk is probably that man is a national treasure. I don't even know if he's American. He's an international treasure.
I think he is American.
Oh, he's a national treasure. I don't know. He's just
again. So we like them if they're Americans.
I don't know if we're gonna leave that in the podcast or not.
We like this droid because he's human, white American.
We like him a little less because he's ginger, though.
Yes, screw those people.
No, I don't know, but it's just that took a turn. Anyway, I thought I had more upbeat things to say about droids, but I don't. I love K2SO, and that's about all I have to say about favorite droids. Most of this podcast is just going to be It's just going to be a downer. It's just is what it is. That's okay.
Well, I also like K2SO. I mean, I didn't really think about why. He was just funny and like the most funny. And I guess, I don't know, he has an attitude that is not like a droid normally has, which is that he disobeys, which again, I use the term disobey because it's just kind of how, without realizing it, how we see him. That is he supposed to obey? Oh yeah, because he's a robot. He is supposed to obey. But
right, they're like, I told you to stay on the ship. Like, why didn't you stay on the ship? It was boring, and I thought you needed help, or something like that.
yeah,
You know, and that makes him like a likable, endearing character because he thinks for himself and he has an attitude, and it's funny. It is interesting to note that the other Imperial like security droids that he used to be, you know, that he's based on,
yeah,
do not have personalities at all. Like when you fight them in Jedi Fallen Order, the video game, they have zero personality whatsoever. They're just this big machine that's trying to get you.
yeah. Which of course makes it okay to destroy them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And you say kill, I say destroy.
Yeah.
Reverse.
But then K2SO like gets his programming changed to not be, you know, one of those Imperial security droids anymore, and now he has a personality. Because good guys have personalities and the bad guys don't, and that's why it's okay for them to lose.
Yes, or die.
Or die.
Or be destroyed, or however you want to phrase it. Well, and it's interesting, you say that he has a personality, Andor says it's a mistake. It's like a quirk of his personality, like an unintended side effect of his reprogramming. He developed his personality as if we're supposed to treat it like it's a malfunction.
Yeah, and as if Andor doesn't live in a galaxy where 90% of the droids have personalities.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like Cassian is new to the galaxy that he lives in. Like, he's been around droid. There's such a big part of life. He's been around droids his whole life. There's no way he's a stranger to droids with personalities.
Yeah.
You would think. But then they write it so that
It's funny.
so that and so that he can say that it's a malfunction and he's not supposed to have a personality, and so that they can choose to reiterate that droids do not have personalities and droids are not alive, with the fine print in parentheses, unless we want them to.
Yeah.
But
And this one does.
and this one does.
And you are later supposed to feel bad when he dies.
Yeah.
Dies, not destroyed.
Right.
It,
Yeah, we tried to take a lighthearted turn in this podcast, and we just went right back to depressing, because that is unfortunately,
But it's what it is.
the heart of droids in Star Wars. It's just it is sad, and if you're going to talk about droids, this is where the conversation's going to go. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's just it is what it is.
yeah, that really, it is what it is. Like that's the ultimate phrase here. That's what exists in Star Wars as we know it. And so I think if we're not going to change what droids are in Star Wars, because they're not, because they make so much money, which is also part of the reason they exist.
Yep.
At least we can have conversations like this, so that at least we can acknowledge, and just take a moment in this podcast and certain YouTube videos or whatever, and like let's just acknowledge that this is what this is, and understand that there are some areas of human nature and of the way things are portrayed in popular media that should be looked at and evaluated.
Yeah.
But they're here to stay. I mean, droids are an integral part of Star Wars.
I wouldn't want them to change it now. After all this time, I wouldn't want them to change it. And if I could go back, I still probably wouldn't change it. But it is worth sitting and talking about and acknowledging, because it is important to acknowledge those kinds of thoughts as being something that is not okay.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, here's an area we can move in that's not as dark, but it's still, I think, an angle on this. that we should get into, which is droids are used for merchandise. I mean, they introduce new droids specifically so they can make toys out of them to then be sold to children, right? I mean, they have new iterations of droids, BB-8.
Yeah, when they finally were able to make BB-8 roll the way he does in the movie, and it didn't take them long. When they were able to finally make a toy that rolled that same way with the head staying in place and the body moving, oh my gosh, it sold out.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately, that first BB-8 toy, and now you can go build one of your own at Galaxy's Edge. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Droids make Star Wars and now Disney a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, once they make that little Dio toy that works just like that, I'm sure that
I'm buying it.
Yeah,
it's the only sequel trilogy merchandise I'll have. I love that droid.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know this for sure, but do they sell? I can't think of the battle droids in the Clone Wars. They don't sell them the same way, right?
I mean, they sell toys of them. You can buy action figures of them.
Right.
There's one that's it's been sitting at Bookman's for weeks now. Every time I'm in there, I see it and I want to buy it, but I'm not going to buy it because it's $70.
Jeez.
It's just an action figure. It must be hard to find because otherwise they wouldn't have it priced so high. But it's an action figure of a Geonosis color. You know how they're red when they're on Geonosis. B1 battle droid, and the head is interchangeable with a C-3PO head.
Oh, that's cool.
And it is awesome, and I want it so bad, but I'm not spending $70 on that toy.
Yeah.
So I mean, but you can buy just regular action figures of the battle droids, and they're in Lego sets and stuff, but they don't sell them in the same capacity.
Well, I guess the point that I'm making is that the friendly droids, the ones that we like, or the ones that are more human-like, are the ones that are our buddies, and the ones that sell more and they're marketed that way or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
you can't go to Galaxy's Edge and build your own battle droid.
Yeah,
That's
or B1 because they're not human. They're not.
Right. They're not worth it.
They're not worth it. They're not, it's the ones that we like that are whatever, and they're our friends.
Yeah, they're our pets.
Yeah. So
they're still not people.
They're still not people. I'm trying really hard not to make just certain jokes. It's so bad. It's just geez. And even before, okay, Nick and I knew that we were going to get into this. I feel like you can't really talk about droids honestly without getting into this.
Yeah.
I don't think we really thought that it was going to get quite this.
And I don't think we realized that the whole podcast was just going to be this, but that's what it ended up being. And that's just because it's such a big topic.
Well, it's a lens that you can look through, and then it starts to change everything else.
It changes the way you watch the movies.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch the movies, especially when I go back and watch scenes I've already seen. I do look at them differently. I still laugh, because I'm supposed to, and I do. But I definitely, you're watching through a different lens after you acknowledge this.
Yeah. And you notice so much more now, too. I mean, I'm going through a rewatch. I should say a rewatch. Most of it is the first time watching Rebels. Me and my fiance are going through the entire Rebels series. And I noticed a couple of times the way that they treat Chopper.
And Chopper's the best.
Yes, and we love Chopper. And he's actually Liz's favorite character, she says, in the entire show. But one thing I noticed is that he has arms.
Yeah.
No other droid I know has arms, which is more anthropomorphic, which is more like a person, right?
It's true.
And that makes him more likable because he looks more like us.
Yeah. They even they gave BB-8 that little thing he does to give you a thumbs up.
Exactly.
In episode 7 because he's a little bit more human now because he gave a thumbs up.
It looks like a human hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chopper, when he salutes with his little hands.
Yes. He's more human-like.
Yeah.
But Kanan was just again, trash talking him or just, shut up and do this or shut up and whatever. They just totally disrespect poor Chopper. And I'm like, no. Having, this sort of viewpoint now, I noticed that now.
Yeah.
Whereas I wouldn't have before. And it's real weird.
Yeah, like toward the end of season 2 of Rebels, they're gonna like leave this one planet that they're on, and I think you're in season 2.
Yeah.
So I will give you no further detail.
I've seen the last couple episodes of season 2.
We're gonna leave this planet that they're on, and they tell Chopper to go get the Phantom, and then they're like, "Wait, don't bring it here." Like, wait, yes, actually leave it at this location. Okay, never mind. We're gonna stay here a while. Just wait for us. Okay, we need you now. We're dying. Like, and they just like the whole episode, and like the last 2 episodes of season 2 of Rebels are phenomenal. This doesn't like overshadow any great things about it, but through those last couple episodes of season 2, they are doing nothing but ordering Chopper around, and even Chopper like isn't having it. Like you can tell by some of his weird little noises he makes that he's not having it. And the main characters don't care that he's not having it because he's a droid and he's going to do what we're going to tell him to do.
Yeah.
And then he saves them by like commandeering this TIE fighter, and he has his little hands that he actually uses to like fly the TIE fighter.
Yeah.
And he saves them by doing this. And it's actually one of the only times you see a droid get that much praise. They actually do like, they are very thankful for him doing that, which is surprising. They're not just like, oh, good, the droid did its job. They actually do praise him in that, so that's good.
Yeah,
Got that
that's
going for
nice
him.
at least. Attaboy.
Yeah,
Well, you're talking about how they're going back and forth with him. It just reminded me of the scene in Return of the Jedi with Han and C-3PO where he's like, hey, we need these supplies. We need this. And he turns around to leave. Oh, hey, by the way, we're going to need this. We're going to need this. And turns around. You know, and eventually he's like, hurry it up, will you? See, and it's funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's still hilarious. Frankly, I think I would have thought that was hilarious even if C-3PO was a person. I mean, that scene would have been hilarious anyway. But you put it on top of all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a little different. But I would have thought that scene was funny even if they made him a person, because that's just hilarious. Telling him over and over, hey, get this. Hey, get this. Stopping him from leaving. Well, hurry up.
Well, hurry it up, will you? C-3PO just looks at him. Yeah, it's just constant.
They do make it very okay in Star Wars, and this is actually stepping away from droids, but they actually make it pretty okay in Star Wars to talk about, like, make negative comments about other people's, like, things they can't control because of whatever, like, species they are. Like, would somebody get this walking carpet out of my way?
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
That's kind of racist. Like,
Yeah.
like Chewie didn't ask to just be covered in fur. Like, but Leia's mad and she takes it out on Chewie by saying something about his looks that he can't control. They make it okay just across the board.
Well, I know, and it just gets back to, like, it's human nature to just kind of make fun of, or to whatever, something that's not like you.
Yeah. But that's comedy, though. I mean, I mean, seriously, a lot of comedy, even comedy that, like, is widely accepted. I'm not talking about, like, comedians that, like, a lot of people are offended by. Like, a lot of comedy, even widely accepted comedy, is at someone's expense.
Right. Yeah.
Often comedy is at someone's expense. That's not an inherent problem. I actually think a problem is when people can't laugh at themselves at all.
Right.
To some degree, most comedy, I would say over 50% of comedy, is at someone's expense. There are certain subjects we stay away from. There are certain things about people we stay away from, things that they can't change about themselves. They're born a certain way. We try not to touch those subjects. But a lot of comedy is at people's expense in some way.
Yeah.
And they really capitalize on it in Star Wars.
Yes. Yes. We don't want people thinking that we don't have a sense of humor, because anyone who knows us, anyone who is a fly in the wall of our ambulance, would know that we definitely have a sense of humor and we can laugh about things that are
that some people probably wouldn't laugh at. But,
Yes, it's other people wouldn't laugh at.
So we're not saying that these things aren't, like, some of these things in Star Wars aren't funny. Some of them are funny. But again, as we've already said, it's worth acknowledging where the faults are.
Yeah. And we're not even saying that it should be changed.
Right.
I mean, it's an integral part of Star Wars now. It's part of the DNA of Star Wars are droids.
Yeah.
And you can't really have Star Wars without having droids.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it wouldn't be one of the lines in that video we're talking about. One of the first things he says is it wouldn't be a Star Wars movie or something like that without a lovable droid stealing the show.
Yeah.
And like, it's usually C-3PO and R2, but sometimes it's K-2SO, sometimes it's L-337, sometimes it's IG-11 in The Mandalorian. Like, there's always a lovable droid in Star Wars, and there's always droids that are treated poorly in Star Wars on the other end of the spectrum. It's all over. You can't change it without completely dismantling Star Wars as a whole.
Yeah. Or killing it. Dismantling or killing. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's weirder the more that you think about it.
Yeah.
But, well, if you have anything else, we're going to leave it right there.
Yep.
Right I don't know. I think we brought it back a little bit. I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe. And,
it's
again, it is what it is.
Everyone's like, "Oh, droids! This will be a nice light."
Yeah, I think we should preface this because I thought the title for this podcast was going to be like, "Let's talk about droids," kind of like how we had our "Let's talk about lightsabers" podcast.
Yeah,
but maybe it won't be "Let's talk about droids." Maybe we'll have to preface what this is going to be a little better when we actually post this. But I think it was good either way. I think it was a good conversation.
I think so. Yeah, I'll just put like droids ... prepare to be sad.
Right. Yeah.
This is not the droid podcast you're looking for. Yeah. So
Okay.
do we know what we're going to talk about in our next one? We had a couple of ideas.
I don't know that we do. I mean, I know we want to do a podcast talking about ships.
That would be cool.
And there's a lot of awesome ships in Star Wars, and that one will be more like, oh, let's talk about ships kind of podcast, and not, not depressing.
Ships aren't human.
And yet L-337's consciousness is in the Falcon now.
Yes.
So
maybe
they are.
Oh no, the one exception. No.
But no.
Vader, no.
But no, it will be. That'll be a lighthearted one. I don't know if that will be our next one or not, because that's what we said was going to be our next one, and then we did this.
Yeah.
So, but
there was
maybe.
like flying ships and then like ground ships maybe. That's
yeah,
two separate
like ground
podcasts.
vehicles as a separate podcast. There's some awesome ground vehicles.
Yes, ground ship, ground vehicle.
Yeah, ground vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah. We still keep talking about the sequels.
Yeah, it's a large topic, and we would both probably need to rewatch them before doing it. So it's not that we don't want to do that podcast. It's just that there's just some preparation involved with that one.
We could honestly do a podcast on each sequel movie. I think there's enough there. We could just talk about The Force Awakens. We could just talk about The Last Jedi.
And then it would take less prep. Because we
Yes.
can watch the one movie and then podcast, and then watch the next movie and then podcast. You know what?
It would take 2/3 less prep.
Yeah. It would take exactly 2/3 less prep. That is correct.
Yeah.
I think we should do that, actually.
Okay. Well, maybe our next podcast will be about The Force Awakens.
Maybe it will.
All right. We'll leave it there. That was, that happened.
That was something. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. We'll talk to each other next time. You can listen.
I just cut it there.
Holy crap. Oh, shit.